Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. A direct link for the group is in the YouTube description section. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018, and we have over 19,000 members. Come and give us a try sometime.
Hello again, and welcome back. We continue the story of me and my brother Ron's early days before reaching the pinnacle of our criminal careers as top London gangsters. Our immediate response to getting the call up for national service was to take it on our toes, following another family tradition, but again with our best interests at heart. Our elder brother talked us out of it. He really believed that the tough training, manly lifestyle, and an opportunity to follow an army boxing career would be the making of us. But as we began our service with an assault on a sergeant within hours of turning up at the Tower of London, the 2 years from March 1952 to March 1954 were to be a catalogue of disaster. That first incident was nothing to do with arrogance, showing how tough we were or that we were bigger than the system. It was simply that we came to the conclusion that the Royal Fusiliers wasn't for us and decided to leave. On the way out, I gave a corporal, who had other plans for us, a smack on the chin that stretched him out on the floor. If we'd been serious about going on the trot, we'd have been wise enough to have hidden up somewhere. As it was, we spent a good night up west and were ready for the law when they got us out of bed in Valence Road at about 5 o'clock in the morning and whisked us off to Bethnal Green Nick to await an army escort back to the Tower. Crime, punishment, it went on day after day as we made complete mugs out of the service. During one of our spells in detention, a corporal opened up and said, "Come on, Kray, visitor for you." I said, "Is it my mother?" He said, "No, it's your Uncle George." As I followed him, I'm thinking I haven't got an Uncle George. As I walked into the visitor's room, there's the old man sitting there with a big grin on his face, giving me a wink. I couldn't believe it. He's still on the run himself. And there he is inside the Tower of London, as cool as a cucumber. Shortly afterwards, Ron, myself and another young bloke, Dickie Morgan, walked out, this time with the intention of staying out. For a few days we stayed at Dickie's parents' house in Clinton Road at Mile End, but knowing the military police would turn up eventually, Ron and I headed back to Bethnal Green, where we planned to keep out of sight. Making sure that the coast was clear, we slipped in to see Mum for 10 minutes, then took off for Hackney. For a time, we used Wally's Cafe as a base. We'd sit about drinking tea and chatting to other young villains who might drop in. One of these was Ronnie Knight. Ronnie had an old taxi at the time, and often we'd jump in the back and he'd drive us to the Royal Dance Hall in Tottenham for a good night out. When there was just the three of us, he'd take us home to his mother's flat in Dalston and she'd cook us supper. His family were lovely people and always made us welcome. We were by no means the only ones on the run from national service. Some of the other fellas we knocked about with were Paddy Austin, Ronnie Diamond, who ran the Diamond Gang, and Benny Robinson, whose brother was hanged for murdering a jeweller while robbing his shop in Bethnal Green Road. We were all tucking into a meal of steak and chips in Wally's Cafe, next door to the bus station in London Fields, when the door opened and in came a fella, immaculately dressed, 5'9" and heavily built. He had high cheekbones, a broken nose and brown eyes. As he took a seat, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, conversation stopped as all eyes were on them. This was Tommy Smithson, a man liked and respected by all the young villains, not only around Hackney, but all over London. He had a deserved reputation as a villain, gambler and fighting man. In fact, he was what you might call a villain's villain, a legend and part of the folklore of underworld London. We had met him once before when we were with our old man, so when he caught sight of us, he came over to our table and struck up a conversation. We explained our predicament of being almost skint and in need of a safe house, and he immediately took out his wallet, peeled off a couple of notes, then took a key from another pocket and handed it to us. The key was to a spiel or gambling club he owned in Berwick Street in Soho. He said between the hours of 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. we could stay there for as many nights as we needed. A billiard table doesn't make the most comfortable bed, but with nothing better, we'd no complaints. This was typical of Tommy. He was a gentleman through and through. Born in Hackney in East London, Tommy was to all us young villains the type of man we would like to be, with his immaculate suits, jet black American Buick car and glamorous lifestyle. I often saw Tommy give money to down and outs and women of the street, and they all thought the world of him. His generosity was an example to everyone, but Tommy wasn't all good. At one time he'd slashed the throat of Fred Slip Sullivan, one of Billy Hill's firm, so Billy and other members of the firm called a meet to talk things over. Tommy was always a loner, so he turned up at the prearranged spot on his own, but to balance things up a bit, he'd armed himself with a revolver. He wasn't an idiot, but when Moish Blue Boy said the firm didn't want any more trouble, so why not shake hands, he went along with it and put the gun away. As soon as he did, someone struck him across the back of the head with a hammer. Lying unconscious, he was so badly stabbed and cut by the Hill mob that one of his arms was almost severed. Attack over, he was put in the boot of Billy's car, then dumped near Hyde Park. As often happened in cases like that, a bit later, a messenger from the firm turned up at the hospital and handed over an envelope containing £500. That was the underworld way. There had been a fallout, the debt was paid, now take a sweetener and keep your mouth shut. Tommy, being of the old school, handed back the money saying, "Don't insult me, I know how the game's played." 3 or 4 years later, at the age of 34, he was found dead in the street with a bullet wound to the throat. Sometime earlier, he'd got into an argument over money he was owed by a gang boss by the name of Caruana. During the disagreement in a Burner Street cafe, he cut the hands and arms of Caruana, then, assuming he'd made his point, he left. But he'd taken a liberty with the Maltese Mafia, and they had a contract put out on him. Ron and I went to his funeral, which took place at St. Patrick's Cemetery in Leytonstone. Prior to the funeral procession, we entered the little terraced house where Tommy lay in an open coffin and took a last look at him as we paid our final respects. He looked at peace, and I noticed the hole in his neck had been plugged with cotton wool by the mortician. Villains from all over London came to pay their respects, and there were wreaths of all shapes and sizes placed on top of the cars, which stretched for half a mile in a long convoy. There was one wreath in the shape of a boxing ring, and another in the shape of a pair of dice showing snake's eyes to depict that Tommy's luck had finally run out. This period on the run from the army was an education to both of us. In the preceding years, we had built up a reputation, not only as skillful boxers, but as fighters to steer clear of. We knocked about with some tasty young fellas and had more than a nodding acquaintance with many well-known villains on the manor. But really, at this time, we were more spectators than players in this tough and what seemed glamorous underworld life. The fact that we had stuck 2 fingers up to the army seemed to give us a certain prestige, and it was seen that Ron and myself didn't talk about what we would or wouldn't do, but were seen to carry out whatever we wanted to do. Soon we were being invited to join in with various criminal enterprises, which not only allowed us to dress in the style of successful villains, but put us in a position to rent a place in North London, which was far enough from Bethnal Green, where we knew the law was keeping an eye open for us, yet near enough to pop home under cover of darkness to see our family in the same way the old man had done for many years. Returning to our flat in Finsbury Park one evening, we spotted a police car outside. Their presence may have been nothing to do with us, but taking no chances, we waited until they pulled away, cleared out our possessions and took off. This time we settled well away from our usual haunts in the alien country of South London. For a time, We kept our heads down in a place just off Peckham Road in Southwark. But as I said, the whole area was alien to us. And a couple of months after our 19th birthday, we made up our minds to spend Christmas at home and fuck the law. We got as far as the Red Cafe in Mile End, when one of life's coincidences reared its ugly head in the shape of PC Edward Fisher, who we'd had a run-in with a few years before. We stepped out of the cafe and there he was. If it had been a film, we'd have said, "Fair cop, governor," and gone in quietly. But it wasn't, so I gave him a shove that sent him sprawling across the slushy pavement, and we were away again. I don't think the law took the apprehension of deserters too seriously, because if they'd put themselves out, we could have been nicked 9 months earlier. Their attitude seemed to be, why should we do the work of the military police? This was different though, and they were not going to turn a blind eye to an assault on one of their own. 2 weeks later, we were both sitting in the scrubs serving a month's sentence, and I could add another press cutting to my scrapbook. The headline, "Kray twins beat up PC," added to our status, even though it was a bit exaggerated. Inside, we were quite proud to be received by the other cons as celebrities, and were able to make friendships with many of them that would last for years. We knew what had to be faced as soon as the month was served, so it was no surprise when we found ourselves handcuffed and on our way to face a court-martial on the day of our release from Wormwood Scrubs. Again, we took it in our stride when we were sentenced to 9 months and sent to Shepton Mallet. A bonus for us would come at the end of our time, dishonourable discharge. You might think that it would have been in our own interest to knuckle down and accept the army way of life for 2 years instead of fighting against them for the same period of time, but that would have been impossible. For like our father and his father before him, there was no way we could agree to authority. At the same time, those 2 years were spent on the run doing just what we wanted to do. For a few months, we ran riot in the fashion the army had come to expect from us until we reached a point where we felt we had nothing else to prove. We hadn't been beaten, but after a long discussion with each other about a future back in London, we decided the quicker we got there, the better. So we kept our heads down and sat out the remaining months in a truce situation. During the whole time we were in the army, there was only one man we had any respect for, and that was a corporal by the name of Ted Haynes. On one occasion, Ron and I barricaded ourselves in a storeroom and refused to come out. The brass tried everything they could think of to get us to come out. They threatened us, sent in a load of sergeants and even a major, but we fucked them all off. Then Ted came to us, talked to us like men, which no one else had thought of, and said, "Do me a favour, lads, and call it a day." Put like that from a good man, how could we refuse? We were fed up with the game anyway. We got the guardhouse, and he got a commendation. A week or so later, he brought in his son, who was 14 and a naval cadet. We had a laugh and a joke with him, and he struck us as a good kid. When he left that day, I never expected to see him again, but 40 years later, he came to visit me here at Maidstone. Within a short period of being discharged and returning to the East End, we began to put the career plan we'd discussed in our cell into action. We started to bring the gang back together. Among them was a likeable young bloke by the name of Ronnie Marwood, who could not have imagined that within a few years he would be put to death by hanging for the murder of PC Raymond Summers. Perhaps we could have imagined things would escalate as they did from the start. Shortly after we were discharged from the army, I got into an argument with a fella in Lyons Tea House at Aldgate. I can't remember his name, but his father had a scrap metal business in Bow that paid a protection pension to Jack Spot, who, in his own words, was king of the underworld. The argument escalated into the other fella squaring up to me, so I slipped a brass knuckle duster onto my right hand and hit him in the face, breaking his jaw and most of his front teeth. A few days later, a whisper on the grapevine told me that the father, leaning on the fact of his weekly pension payment, had been to see Jack's spot in an effort to have us sorted out. We thought, okay, if Spotty wants to stick his nose in our business, then he'll get a shock because we'll be ready for him. We put the word out among our own team, contacted Johnny Nash and his firm for all of us to meet at Valence Road on the following Sunday. Our collection of tools was still hidden under the bed at home, undisturbed while we'd been away. In no time at all, everyone was kitted out with some form of weapon, and 40 strong we headed for Ziggy's Cafe in Petticoat Lane, where we knew Jack and his mob would be. As there were so many of us, I suggested we split up and spread out just in case we caught the eye of the law. By way of an anticlimax, Jack's spot never showed. Perhaps his grapevine warned him to keep his head down, or he and his followers would have been cut to pieces. On reflection, I was pleased that the intended fighting never happened, because both Ron and I became friends with all those men we might have hurt. Without effort, I can recall their names today: George and Jimmy Woods, Teddy Machin, Little Jackie Reynolds, and Ted and Bill Robbins, all from Upton Park. From Aldgate was Moish Blue Boy, and from Whitechapel, the Little Jew, Arnie Rosen. Another of Spotty's men, Sonny the Yank, would sometime later join the ranks of that exclusive club of 11 men, whose jaws I would break. Our first career move, though not planned as such, was to place us on the threshold of unimaginable heights that would eventually lead us to wealth, power, notoriety, and subsequently a lifetime's imprisonment. But as we handed over a fiver for the first week's rent on the rundown Regal Billiard Hall in Eric Street, all that was in our minds was now we had a base more businesslike than our bedroom in Valence Road, and at the same time we could be earning a few quid. To be honest, when we walked in on that first day, it looked a daunting prospect. The place was a hole. It was dirty, dingy, and the dozen billiard tables were grey under accumulated cigarette ash. I've never been afraid of hard graft, as long as it's in my own interests. So with plenty of elbow grease, soapy water, and a few gallons of paint, the place was transformed within a couple of weeks. A fitted bar and a delivery of drinks added the final touch, and we were in business. There was a bonus to our Eric Street premises. To one side was a small scrapyard which we farmed out for rent, and to the front was a large forecourt where we'd soon be selling cars. In fact, one of the first cars we bought for resale was a Ford Austin that was built in 1900 and looked like a toy. I sold it to a Pakistani man for a small sum, yet today that same car would be worth thousands. Being in the trade, even though it was only in a small way, allowed me to buy on the cheap, and from that time I owned so many cars for my personal use that I truly forget how many or what they were, but some of my favourites still come easily to mind. One of the best was a bottle green Mercedes-Benz 220/SE two-door saloon. It was beautiful inside and out, which was to be expected as I paid £5,000 for it in 1963. I must have looked like royalty, which never failed to bring a smile to my face as, whenever I drove through London, policemen on point duty would salute as they waved me through an intersection. Another car of royal appearance was an Austin Shireline. Though for speed nothing could touch my American Ford Galaxy, I loved speeding, but it often ended in minor crashes. A Sprite sports car was so low to the ground that I ripped the bottom out of it on the curb outside one of our clubs. More serious was when I was speeding through Mile End in my usual reckless style. A lorry braked sharply and the Vanguard I was driving ploughed into the back of it. The motor was wrecked and I had to be cut free and carted off to the hospital in Bancroft Road in Stepney. I still bear the scar from 6 stitches in my elbow. From the hospital, I went straight to the Double R Club. With my bandages, cuts, bruises, and a very swollen face due to a penicillin allergy, a lot of people thought I'd been in a fight. They should have known better, for without false modesty, I can in all honesty say that in all the fights Ron or I had, and they number hundreds, neither of us was ever cut or received broken bones. Apart from from the car lot at the front of the Regal, I fenced off a corner for privacy and invited two very special friends of ours, Dot and Tommy Walsh, to pull in their caravan and live without aggravation from the authorities. Ron and I first met Tommy Walsh, sometimes known as Tommy Brown, but most often as Tommy the Bear, when we went to a gym in Tottenham where he did a bit of sparring. I know gentle giant is a bit of a cliche, but I can't think of a better way to describe him. There'll be more on Tommy Brown in the next part. And that brings us to the end for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.